Hey everybody, what's up? How's it going? This is Marisa, Dianetics, and I'm here making another one. Making another one. This is actually, it's back to business, it's serious time, serious Scientology talk time. Every once in a while, tensions rise up and there's like massive blowouts that happen, and it literally is in this community one of those, like, when it rains it pours situations. I don't know what it is, but it's like one fight breaks out and then it's like bam, everybody's kung fu fighting, man. So but then it like simmers down and then it's like quiet, and I think that's kind of a like a little simmer down phase going on right now, which the simmer down phases can last anywhere from 3 to 6 months, and then there's another blowout. It's the way it goes, and it's not just this community. I was telling somebody that I watch a lot of bath bomb makers, soap makers. They even had one of them recently had to make a video addressing her trolls, and I'm like, who the hell's gonna like troll? Who the hell's gonna troll the bath bomb community? But man, they even get their crazies too. So I don't know what it is. I think we just live in a messed up world right now, and people are just going nutty. I don't know. I have no idea what the answers are. But with that being said, the title of this video is essentially it's going to be about what it's like growing up in Scientology while growing up in the real world at the same time. We're known as the public Scientologists, and us second gens, I see it. I get it. I get it from other second gens and public alike. They have this misconception where it's like, if you weren't in Sea Org, you don't really know what's up, which to a certain extent is true. I can't imagine growing up in the Sea Org, especially like in Clearwater, in the ship and all that stuff. And what I've noticed with the Sea Org in LA, it's like, yeah, you're still the Sea Org, but you're not living on the Freelands in LA. You're in like the giant, like big blue buildings, and you go to Clearwater sometimes, but you're not living in Clearwater. You're the Sea Org in Los Angeles. So correct me if I'm wrong, because that's just what it seems to me. And all around, if your life has to be dedicated to Scientology 24/7, like 7 days a week, non-stop, yeah, hell yeah, that shit's gonna be way more intense. The abuse, the things that are within, it's a lot heavier than growing up as a public Scientologist. And I've always been very, very open about that. Um, but on the flip side, there's this misconception that just because you were never in Sea Org and you grew up in Scientology, that like, just you're a wimp, no big deal. And that's not true. That's not true at all. You know, look at Grant Cardone for a little, for instance. He's a public Scientologist. You see the wacky ass shit he's doing with his kids, and you know, my parents were very fanatical Scientologists, and plus having a half sister running the org that's even more fanatical than the parents. I mean, my sister was like Tom Cruise level fanatic into Scientology. She really was. And it's weird. It's weird if you've never like dealt with a whatever you want to call it, brainwashed, hypnotized, someone in a trance. When it comes to Scientology, again, potato, it's all the same shit. All right? Because you hear these people that are like, oh, it's not, there's no such thing as brainwashing. And my attitude is like, it's all the same shit. When you're that into Scientology, you're either hypnotized by it, you're brainwashed, or you're in some kind of trance where your mind is just completely taken over by the ideology and the belief system. Um, so I'm here in times like this because we have a lot of viewers watching us that come from the non-Scientology world, and they think that we are, again, the fights that we have and the emotions that we're expressing. I've noticed a lot of non-Scientologists, or never ends, whatever. I prefer non-Scientologist. Thomas Neo, incel, stop copying my mindset and the shit that I say, because it's getting fucking old, homie. You're copying like everything I say. Like, make up your own shit and your own, like, research Scientology instead of listening to us and just like write, like, recording everything we say so you can make it on your own videos. Because first of all, you suck at it, and number two, you get about 90% of it incorrect. This is my little piece of advice for you, friendly advice. But, I don't want to veer off into that insanity. Um, my point is, a lot of these people that are non-Scientologists, they think that we don't understand and that we're crazy. But I want to let you guys know I do understand, because I did grow up in the same world that you all grew up in. I went to public schools. I've witnessed, you people commit an adultery, same things that you guys complain about us for doing. I've seen a good chunk of modern society do drugs, commit adultery, you know, SA, DV, all the stuff, abuse that you're not allowed to say on YouTube. It goes on in the non-Scientology world. And you know what? There's like 50,000 Scientologists worldwide versus over 7 billion non-Scientologists. And likewise, to be in the Sea Org probably only makes up 10 to 15% of the entire Scientology population. The other 75 to 80% are public Scientologists, like how I grew up in. We're the vast majority, which is why I think it should be discussed from time to time, because people tend to forget that, and they just think Scientology is only a Sea Org thing. And that's not it at all. It's actually, now, this is how it used to be years ago. It used to be pretty difficult to get into the Sea Org. They had so many requirements, like you can't join if you've ever been on SSRIs, if you've ever been institutionalized, if you've ever done LSD, which was my situation, if you're gay, if you've ever tried to end your life, if you are a member of the media, or if you have any family members that are in the media or the government. Those all used to be standards of who they would not allow in the Sea Org. So it wasn't like they just accept everyone. So that's the thing. I mean, you have to realize that the people you see, the second gen speaking out that were in the Sea Org, they are the ones that had it the toughest, and they are the ones that literally lived in a bubble away from reality. Now, I grew up in that same bubble, but I also grew up in the reality bubble too at the same time. This is water, by the way, for the people that watch me that are like, oh, she's drinking a bear, oh my god. Hi, Chingo, and I guess I can't believe some people in this planet. But I like to make videos about this, discussing what it's like to remind people that, there are, living in a non-Scientology world is not a picnic. When I was going to public schools, I used to get my ass kicked almost every day in the 3rd grade by this little boy because of my hair. I mean, he would see me walk into school, and whenever I was by myself, he would just beat the crap out of me. Now that's bullying, getting the shit beat out of you every day for your hair by, a little boy. Um, what's interesting is I never told on him either, because I came from that era of, snitches get stitches, and if you tell on people, you're like a wimp. And so I just had to tough it out and let it go on, and didn't tell a damn person. So, when you grow up in Scientology, and you also grow up in a somewhat rougher neighborhood like what I grew up in. I grew up in Maryvale, which is a suburb of Phoenix, and it's considered like one of the shittiest areas in Phoenix. It's full of gangs, it's full of drugs, prostitution. Back when I was growing up, it wasn't so much the drugs and prostitutions, but prostitution. If you grew up in like places like Los Angeles, Phoenix, anywhere in the Southwest, probably Chicago, New York, Dallas, the 90s, I would say the late 80s and the early 90s it was just an era of gangs, street gangs galore. I mean, and that's what I grew up around. So I think that's a large portion of why I talk the way I do. And when some people are like, oh, someone told me the other day that I'm imposing and intimidating, and posted a picture on my Facebook where I'm joking and making a tough face and holding up a fist. And I'm like, what is that supposed to do, man? You're trying to like falsely portray me as some like Ronda Rousey that's just out to kick everybody's ass. And I find it absolutely hilarious, because the way that I act is just, to me, that's just normal everyday behavior where I live. And yeah, I'm someone where if you call me names on the internet or instigate a fight, I'm going to defend myself. It doesn't mean that I'm imposing or I'm intimidating. It just means don't start fights with people if you don't expect people to fight back, because sometimes they do, and I'm one of those people. Doesn't mean that I have mental problems. It's usually a human reaction to defend yourself. So, when you grow up in the world of Scientology, and you're taught to believe that, everything is about saving the planet and hip hip hooray, and, all the courses and all the things you have to do, and, you can't talk to any people that are suppressive persons, and, you have to disconnect from your family members that talk crap or are against Scientology, all of that stuff. And then you grow up in the normal, like, public school environment where none of that shit goes on. So naturally, as a child when I was growing up, I didn't want to be a part of the Scientology world. I didn't want to be a hip hip hooray person. I didn't give two shits about clearing the planet, because I could see what was happening in reality, and nothing that David Miscavige said, which was occurring. The things he would say in Scientology, like Dianetics is the #1 bookseller and everyone is trying to be a Scientologist, I would, in the reality, see that none of that is going on, and no one even knows what the hell Scientology even is. So it was very weird growing up in that type of I don't know what the word is, like paradoxal environment. Probably misusing that word, but whatever. Um, but it's like you're growing up in a belief system saying one thing, and then you're living in another world where your belief system isn't occurring. So it's quite of it is a very interesting way to grow up. Now, what I did was, because I knew that about Scientology, and it never sat well with me from childhood, because my family members would make fun of my parents about raising me in it. My grandma would constantly yell at my mother for raising me in it. And, I think I've talked about before in one of my videos how I did have one of my friends at school who was allowed to go with me to a Scientology kids' night. And when her parents found out that it was Scientology, that friend of mine was never allowed to come to my house again. Ever. So I was the kid that sort of got discriminated against, where, it was kind of whispered amongst people like, hey, she's being raised in that Scientology stuff. Keep your kids away from her house. I was like one of those kids, and um, it was kind of a humiliating feeling to know that you're being raised in a system that the whole entire planet hates, and you're the only one in your state that's growing up in it, which I was. When I was like 9 or 10 years old, I was the only one. Then, there were some toddlers, like 2 year olds to 6 year olds, but I'm not going to hang out with babies when I'm 10 years old, right? So, um, I'm just thinking back on a lot of this, and it's, it's just interesting because I can tell there are things that a lot of followers that watches, a lot of ex-cult victims, where they've never been exposed to things like prisoners, gangsters, crime, drugs, people screwing people over, and con artists, and just overall people that are rampant in the non-Scientology world. And I've been dealing with people like that my whole life. I've been screwed over by people like that. And knowing that element and then knowing the Scientology element, it's like, yeah, I can see both sides essentially. So it puts me in a weird spot because I know what's going on with when people are trying to screw us over or do silly things. I can see it because I've seen it on the streets before. When I come out and try to explain it, you know, it's like I don't want to be like a little shit disturber or instigator, but at the same time, I've made one of my very first videos on my channel is talking about con artists, scam artists, and grifters, and how the anti-Scientology movement is a gold mine for it. Okay? Because we're literally a cult that you have to pay to be a part of. And there are some wealthy motherfuckers in this cult. So con artists and criminally minded people view us, and all they see is like licking their chops like, I'm going to make a lot of shitload of money off of these gullible ex-Scientologist, ex-Christian cult members. That's what a lot of these people see. And I've experienced it firsthand years ago with someone taking advantage of me in this community for their documentary film they were trying to make. And I see it going on now, just in different forms. And it doesn't sit well with me because it's like, if you want to scam people, if you want to go take advantage of like a big corporation or a Walmart, or do something with, corporations and, places that are really taking advantage of the public, that's one thing. But when you're taking advantage of a vulnerable group of people who are trying to figure their lives out, and then you're lurking amongst them to try to make money, get money, I think it's sick. And I have a zero tolerance policy for that as well. And yeah, I don't stand up for people like that because whether you grew up in the Sea Org or you grew up the way that I did, it doesn't matter. There's a lot of people here that I see that haven't been out that long. And when I say not that long, I would say 5 years or less to me is considered, you haven't been out of Scientology very long. For me, it took me about 10 years to finally get all of, I call it Scientology residue. I was 22 the last time I did anything in Scientology. It took me about a solid decade to stop feeling guilty for doing certain things, stop thinking in my mind, oh, someone must be third partying me, uh, to stop being afraid of, that like psychiatrists are going to kill the world, and then plus a couple of like Scientology words that I used to use. It took me 10 years to where I finally think I was like, okay, I'm 100% Scientology free. So again, it's been like 20, I just turned out a birthday, so about 23 years now since I have had zilch to do with the Church of Scientology. Um, but the memories are always going to be there. The way I feel about auditing and how auditing has affected me, now that I don't think is ever going to go away with me. The after effects of auditing and what it's done to me now that I'm an adult, since I started having auditing done on me from the time I was like 6 years old. Let's say 6 to 20. My first, 6 to 20 years of my life, yeah, I was being put on the cans constantly, given sec check questions, all kinds, having to do OW write ups. I was put in a condition of liability once. So there's just a lot of, one of the most recent examples I'll say of what I've experienced is my little girl. When I take her to school, I became friends with one of her classmates' mothers who, she told me herself she's a paranoid schizophrenic. She's been diagnosed with it. We walk to school together. Sometimes she'll kind of go on these tangents of like the cell phone towers are watching us type stuff, but again, I'm used to dealing with people like that as well. I have a very high tolerance level for just, like I said, weirdness, craziness, whatever. I have a very, very high Richter scale threshold on just kicking back and listening to people say what they have to say, no matter how crazy it may seem to others. But she starts going on her rant with me, and then she says, ever since you told me that you were raised in Scientology, I feel like people are watching me. And it really gave me a weird feeling when she said that to me. It actually kind of gave me a horrible feeling inside. Because again, it's like that stigma that I have to face to this very day if I even mention the word Scientology. Um, I'm single. I'm in the dating circuits. I go on dates sometimes. I know that's going to shock the incel boys. Like, wow, Marisa's go dating. Marisa's openly admitting that she's single and dating. Yes, I am. And so are many millions of women my age range. It's very, very common. So, sorry about that. As like I said, some of this shit's just unbelievable of what these people find shocking or newsworthy about us. Uh, but some of the guys that I have met going on dates, we'll just talk about like, how we grew up, and then I had one of them tell me the other day, he says, "Oh, I bet you can't top this one. I've been to Area 51 before." And I said, "Oh, I bet you I can top that one. I was born and raised in Scientology." And he just says, "Oh, you got me. No one can top that shit." So I am used to the stigma of just as soon as I say that, one of two things happen. People don't care and we get along and talk anyways, or I scare them and they don't want anything to do with me because I tell them I was born and raised in Scientology. Um, Even though I am not a Scientologist, I'm highly against it, they still get scared. Which is what happened with my daughter's friend. She starts telling me that she thinks that Scientologists are watching her now, and I dropped my daughter off to school today, and I saw this mother walking, and as soon as she saw my car, she put her head down and wouldn't even make eye contact with me. And I'm sure part of it is due to her mental illness that she's struggling with, but another part of it, it makes me feel weird knowing that someone is afraid of me because I was raised in Scientology. That's why I can't talk about it too much to people I meet publicly in person, because it's a weird thing to tell someone It's probably the weirdest thing on earth, honestly. One of the top five. Um, so, I know I tend to ramble on. I think there's a girl with a screen name named Ramble On, but I say that constantly in just my normal speech. I tend to ramble on a lot about what I've been through. And what I want to point out to all of you second gens, ex Christian cult members who are speaking out, all of you, we each have our own unique personalities, our identities. We have people like Nora and Serge who resonate with the LGBT crowd of ex cult victims. Um, there's me, who I've received messages from people that say, hey, I have a very similar story as yours. So I'm kind of, I don't know what I would be categorized as, but um, we all have people that resonate with us who are watching us, and our stories, as unique and individualized as they are, we're going to hit home with someone out there who's going to be thankful, and we're going to be like a motivation for them on why they escaped their cult. So we should take a look at that and actually kind of be proud of ourselves for having a voice to hopefully influence people out there to realize that their cult system that they've been a part of is just that. It's a high-powered cult control group. So I wanted to say that as a message to encouragement to all of you. And I wanted to reiterate my message about my upbringing, because there are a lot more second gen Scientologists coming forward, and a lot of them do have public backgrounds like myself, where they had a hardcore fundamentalist Scientologist upbringing in their homes, yet they did go to public schools and they experienced the normalcy of the real world. So that's my story, and people tend to think of these recent blowouts that have occurred, and why I have the perspective that I do. Well, I have the real world perspective and I have the Scientology perspective combined. And so I know how to talk to like the Scientology people, ex-Scientology people, and their experience, but I also know how to speak to the regular society and the people who are former drug addicts, DV victims, people who have faced abuse, because I have experienced all of those myself in the non-Scientology world. And I've been very, very open about my past struggles and what I've done. Um, you know, I used a lot of it as a form of escapism, especially, I would say, just, experimenting with drugs, mind-altering drugs when I was younger, because I figured they're altering my mind in Scientology with the e-meter. I might as well have a little fun with it with my friends and party and alter my mind. So I kind of took this route from my teenage years to do the opposite of what L. Ron Hubbard said, of being just this like prim and proper Scientologist that never does anything that's out ethics. No, I wanted to be as out ethics as I possibly could when I was younger. Uh, because Scientology didn't really appeal to me for the time I was a child, but I did. I had to imagine having to grow up in something that you don't want to be growing up in, but you have to, because you have no choice, because your parents that's what they believe. So they drag you along for their cult hop and ride. I watched that video today by Michelle. I can't pronounce his last name. He knows. He was on Natalie's show, and I watched because his story is actually extremely interesting. And the guy is extremely intelligent, but I'm not going to try to pronounce French because I don't know. I can't say. The French language is just it's a beautiful language, but it's a very, to me, a difficult language to speak. But probably how some people think Spanish would be a very difficult language to speak. But Natalie's channel, I think it's called Life After a Cult. And you know, again, because we're all second gens, it's like I watch the shows, but there's so many of us, and I can't watch everyone's channel all the time. But she had a very interesting guest on. And I do remember his name. It looks like Michael, but it's pronounced Michel. You know how in France they just pronounce things differently. That's all I can say with their names. I think his last name is Lafacoeur, but I have no idea how to pronounce that. So, but go watch his show on Natalie's channel. It's mind blowing. It's one hell of a very interesting story because he called them cult hoppers, his parents. There's another term we use too. Like they're called spiritual window shoppers. So people that just go around and they're interested in these different alternative systems and they go from one to one. That's how my parents were, well, before they found Scientology. And even after my mother was declared from Scientology, she still was cult hopping and trying to find other cults to join. And then she ended up settling down with the independent Scientology bunch for, I don't know, 7 or 8 years. But that was her process of healing. I'll never get it. I don't understand leaving the Church of Scientology to go to the independent Scientology because you're still believing in L. Ron Hubbard and his practices. The only difference is you're saving some money because you could do it from the privacy of your home. So I never understood why the first gen Scientologists who are declared become independent Scientologists. I guess I do understand. It's because they believe in it with all their hearts. But, you know, my point is he kind of had a Sea Org upbringing, but a cult upbringing, Christian cult upbringing, and a Scientology cult upbringing. And he experienced drugs, the street life, and the rougher elements of life. Very similar to except again, I didn't join Sea Org. But I find stories like his fascinating. That's why I refer to myself as a hybrid second gen, because I grew up born and raised in Scientology, but I did grow up in the street kind of rougher aspect too. I think another hybrid would be Nate Rich, if some of you remember him. He was kind of like a troubled youth that got sucked into Mace Kingsley by his parents, but if you notice him, he has that edge to him that he's experienced the harsher part of the non-Scientology world too. And I can sense that with the Michelle Frenchman second gen that was on Natalie's channel. And I wish I could pronounce that damn name, but I'm going to have to hear him say it or watch Natalie's channel again. So I want to say Francois, but that's not it. I ain't even going to try. So, but, you know, he has this edge to him. It is this edge of like, he's been through some shit with Scientology, but he's been through some shit on the streets too. So have I, and so has Nate. And it's interesting to be able to understand Scientology thoroughly, but also understand how inhumane and cruel and how abusive the non-Scientology world can be as well. We get a double whammy of abuse. We get the non-Scientology abuse and we get the Scientology abuse. So, you know, there's so much more. Again, I'm going to make my videos in pieces, you know, bits and pieces. It's just too much to talk about, and I don't want to talk for 2 hours straight about myself. So I hope that's it for now. I just wanted to say that to you all. If it can help anyone, that's great. If it can educate any of you in any way whatsoever. And I do think we as ex-Scientologists need to remind ourselves, minus the trolls, a lot of people who view us, they're suffering from their own trauma, and many of them are at home with disabilities, physical illnesses, and you name it, emotional suffering. And for whatever reason, they feel a connection to us. And I read the comments where they say that, like, I just feel connected to these group of ex-Scientologists. And when I read comments like that, it hits home for me, because I know a lot of people think we're assholes, but there's a lot of people who understand us, and they feel a connection to us. And for all of you, I want to apologize first off how some of us get in, there's big blowouts, because it's not a good example, really. It's not a good example for us to put on, publicly for people. Now, I want to say defending ourselves against attacks, that's entirely different, because we get attacked, stalked, harassed, and insulted constantly. So those of us who defend ourselves, I'm not apologizing for that type of behavior, because just because we are second Gen X Scientologists does not mean that we're not allowed to defend ourselves. And when I see us defending ourselves and people commenting like, how dare you get mad and express yourself, no, we are allowed to express and defend ourselves just like you people in the non-Scientology world. So, for now, that's what I would like to say. I want to thank all of you. And, I'm not as bad as people think I am. I just, yeah, I don't like being provoked. I don't like being taunted. There's no need for it. And defending myself does not make me a bad person, nor does it make me an intimidating person. So, for whatever this is worth, it was just a video to discuss more about myself, to hopefully help some people out there that are struggling, to let you know that we are connected. I feel empathy for you that are struggling and having problems, especially the Christian cults community that has joined us. You all have taught me so much, and you have helped me, because growing up as the lone Scientology in a Christian world, which is my environment where I live, you all are helping me just figure out pieces of my life with people I've known who come from Christian fundamentalist upbringings themselves. And I want to thank you all for being a part of this and helping people such as myself. And those of you who say that, that you feel a connection to us, you all are greatly appreciated. And I think that needs to be said. I guess that's going to be it for now, because this is getting kind of long. But as always, you guys, take care of one another, take care of yourselves, and I will catch you all next time. Thank you.